Am I on now? Awesome. Okay, I'm going to start as you all wander in, just to keep us on schedule today. I know some need to drive home, but my name is Kara Watoon. I am the lead of the foster care support program at Kingdom Workers. I'm happy to be a sponsor of CLR here today. Kingdom Workers spreads the gospel by mobilizing Christians in locally sustainable mission work. We are currently involved in mission programs in 9 countries and the Apache Reservation. And in the United States, we have 3 ministries that we invite members of our congregations to engage with. And of course, I'm here today to talk about foster care support. Previous to coming to Kingdom Workers, I worked for 19 years doing in-home parenting and education to families that were involved in child protective services. So my heart is in child welfare. And when families are broken, that becomes orphan care, which is certainly a pro-life initiative that we all need to be aware of. The foster support program is a new program that has been around since 2019. The first introductions were actually made at the end of 2018. Ran as a pilot program in the Watertown, Wisconsin area, Jefferson County, and as of January 2020, was available to individuals and congregations throughout the whole United States to connect volunteers who can serve to support foster families in their own communities. I don't know where to point this. Okay, thank you. So what is the need for foster care support? More than 650,000 children are in need of a safe place to live when their biological homes are not safe every year. The point-in-time count on that is 430,000 children as we speak. In the state of Wisconsin, we're probably at about 8,000 children in childcare at this moment. The need exists in every town, in rural community, and big cities. And in fact, our rural areas have a greater need, often because there aren't as many resources for families. Despite the need for safe homes for children, there are never enough foster homes. And as we look closer and explore why that is, research says that most foster homes that discontinue fostering, up to 50% of them who become licensed in their first year do not continue doing foster care, say that the reason for that is lack of support. 650,000 kids need care every year. 54% of them need that home for more than a year. So through connecting to support foster families, we are offering those families the support that they need so that they can continue fostering. Through connecting with these families, we also have the opportunities to connect with the children in their care. The presence of a caring adult is particularly important for teens and young adults in foster care. And the presence of a caring adult is related to numerous positive outcomes for these young people, including greater resilience, lower stress, less likelihood of arrest and incarceration, reductions in homelessness, higher levels of employment, less delinquent conduct, favorable health, and less suicidal ideation. It's not, you progress it for me, thank you. So the Kingdom Workers' role in connecting volunteers in their own community is to help local volunteers take the first steps to develop a foster support ministry in their community. Sometimes congregations are looking for guidance and support in developing an official outreach ministry. Sometimes they're just individuals that have it on their heart to help in some way, but they don't know how to take those first steps. In either case, we are working to connect volunteers with foster families in their own communities. We ensure that volunteers have background checks, assist volunteers in inventorying their God-given gifts, and provide basic training in trauma-informed care and gospel proclamation. If a foster family is not already known to the volunteer, we can work with them to connect with a local licensing agency and offer an introduction. We are available for ongoing support as needed. Every volunteer has different gifts, and every family has different needs, so we just work together to make sure that we can support in the best ways possible. Can I get the next slide? Thanks. Our goal is to strengthen families through partnerships with local congregations to reach out with encouragement, support, and the gospel. We do this by surrounding children with loving Christian adults and actively work to promote spiritual, emotional, physical, and relational healing. We take every opportunity possible to make sure that we are sharing the reassurance of the unconditional love of Jesus. In 2020, 82 local volunteers served 21 foster families in 5 different states. So far in 2021, we have been greatly blessed to add 41 new volunteers and 6 additional states, and we have expanded relationships throughout Wisconsin to serve numerous families. Some volunteers use their gifts of service to provide meals on the busiest night of the week, to do mentoring, or to provide childcare. Other volunteers are eager to use their gifts to help with home maintenance projects, yard work, or house cleaning. We just do whatever we can to make sure that the families have the strength and stamina they need to serve well. Groups have also served to support and introduce themselves to their local foster care communities by organizing a freezer meal distribution or hosting a donation drive for school supplies or new shoes and socks for kids when they go into care. Sometimes churches have been willing to organize Christmas adoptive families or a parent night out respite event to give foster parents a night off. As you can see, volunteers can serve using their gifts of every age. I am connected to volunteers from college age all the way through retirement. Everyone can do something to make a difference. If anyone has questions about this ministry or how we might partner together to serve in your community, I do have a table out there and some information, feel free to take my card and we can talk later. And up next, I am happy to introduce Leah Bongard, who's going to tell us a story about her experience with adopting. Thank you. This is not working, so I don't know, unless it needs to be on or something. There's a little switch on the top. See it? Yeah, that way. Good luck.
All right. Okay. Just want to start out by saying I'm not a professional speaker at all. Like, I've done a couple talks on this before, but feel a little intimidated being the last one and looking at all these other speakers and their bios, and like, I have no letters before or after my name, unless you count MRS for Mrs. Bongard, which that's really my mother-in-law, I don't know. But I'm just a mom. I mean, I have another job, but I am just a mom of 2 wonderful children who happen to be special in different ways. And I've had the privilege of speaking to different crowds about why my children are special. I've spoken, maybe some of you, if you've ever done and come to anything about the Mission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, I've spoken about that because of my daughter. But I'm not coming to talk about that today. Today I'm talking about my experience with embryo adoption. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. Genesis 9, verse 7 says, "Be fruitful and multiply." I'm probably most Christian couples, when they get married, have a desire, and maybe not all, but most of them have a desire to have children. But what if you can't? What do you do? What happens? Like, about 10% of childbearing couples face infertility at some point in time. And this is just our story of how infertility brought us to the blessing of what is called embryo adoption. It's maybe not something that any of you have ever heard of. It's not something that's been around for a long time, but it has something that has to do a little bit with IVF, which is something you heard about a couple presentations ago. Our story did not start with infertility. Our story starts with a honeymoon baby. We got married, and a couple weeks after we got home from our honeymoon, I was pregnant. We thought, whoa, that was easy. And we thought, well, maybe we better, after we had our first child, we were like, well, maybe we better plan for the next one. Like, we don't want to have a bunch of kids in a row, and so we better plan for the next one. And well, we all know that God's plans are not our plans, and we found that out. About 3 years after our daughter was born, we decided, well, let's try for another one. Well, that trying took quite some time. So after over a year of trying, we decided, well, maybe we should see a fertility doctor, because we had talked to my doctor, and he said, yeah, maybe you should check into a fertility doctor. I was 31, I think, when I had my daughter, so I wasn't super young, but I wasn't super old when we were trying for another one. So he said, yeah, go see a fertility doctor. He referred us to somebody, and we went to a fertility clinic and did all the testing. My husband tested, I tested, and we were diagnosed with secondary infertility. Obviously, we weren't infertile the first time, but there was a problem with my eggs. My eggs were not good. They said, you have eggs, they're just not very good eggs. So we were given options. We're like, well, what do we do now? And they said, well, there's a couple things you can do. You can do what's called IUI, which is intrauterine infertilization, or you can do IVF, or you can adopt. And we decided to do IUI because with that, they take the sperm and they implant it into your uterus, and nature takes its course. God takes its course, and you see if you get pregnant that way. Nothing is done outside the body. We heard about IVF, and I think it was talked about a little bit a couple presentations ago. And when we asked about that, where they take the sperm and the egg and they put it together and an embryo is created in the petri dish, we said, well, okay, well, what happens, if there's more embryos than you need? What happens with those then? And they said, well, if you don't use them all, we can discard them for you. And I thought, what? You can discard them for us? Like, to us, I'm a Christian, like, life begins at conception. And that conception, to me, is in that petri dish. And you're going to discard those for me? No, I don't think so. We said, well, what else? What else could happen to those? And they said, well, you could store them. We can freeze them, and we can store them for you if you want to use them again. And they said, or you can donate them to science. Okay, great. In other words, they get killed or die, getting used for science. That means they're going to get destroyed. That didn't sit well with me either. And they said, and this was the first time I had ever kind of heard of embryo adoption, but they kind of said, or you can give them to another couple who's also infertile. Okay. But all those things that I heard about kind of turned me off to the IVF, because I was like, you're not destroying my embryos. If you're making embryos, I don't want any of them destroyed. So we decided to do the IUI. I was like, great. Well, let's try that. Well, we tried. And we tried 5 times. And that did not work. Didn't work at all. And our daughter was about 6 years old, I think, by the time we were 5, 6 years old when we were trying. And we tried to kind of explain to her, like, why is mom always going to the doctor? And we tried to, obviously it was a very traumatic time for us. It's very emotionally upsetting when you're trying to get pregnant and you don't get pregnant, and you keep going, trying all these things, and nothing happens. A couple times she catch me crying. We tried to explain to her, we're trying to have another baby, and it's just not working. And she said to me, I think it was right before the 5th cycle, after the 4th one, when we weren't having a baby, she sat down and said to me, Mom, maybe Jesus just said no. And I thought, that faith of a child and that wisdom of a child. Maybe I should have listened to her, but, well, we did one more cycle after that. And then my doctor said, well, do you want to try IVF? And I said no, because I had done some more research, and I found out that 84% of clinics just throw away those embryos that aren't used. And that 31% of embryos that are created in the process, when they're doing the embryos, that 31% are deemed unusable by the doctors and are just thrown away without, like, the parents even knowing. Like, they look at them and say, this one doesn't look good, because they grade them. They look at them and say, well, this is an A, this is a B, this is a C, this is this one looks like a C or a D. We don't like that one, we're just gonna throw it away. And the parents don't even know. So we said, no, we're not doing IVF, we're done with this fertility stuff. I think we'll adopt that. Let's look into that. So we went to Bethany Christian Services, and we started the process of adoption. And we went through our home study, and we went through a meet and greet thing where they have the tables out and you look at international adoption, you look at domestic adoption, and they had this little flyer on embryo adoption. And we had already decided that we would do a domestic adoption. I picked up that flyer and kind of stuck it in my purse and kind of forgot about it for a while. And we went to one of our first classes that you have to take for adoption. And it wasn't really a class, but it was more of a forum where they had people from all sides of adoption who were adults now. They had somebody who was adopted as a child, speaking about her situation. They had somebody who had given up a child for adoption and later reconnected with her. And they had couples who had adopted. So you have people from all different sides of adoption. And they talked, and they had beautiful stories about their adoption situations and how everything worked out. And I sat and cried through the whole thing. It was emotional, and my husband and I on the way home looked at each other and I said, I can't do this. I just don't think this is what was meant to be for us. And part of that was the adoption laws in Wisconsin are very generous to the biological mother. They have up to, I believe it is, 2 years to change their mind after the adoption and take the child back. And I said, I don't think I could bond with a child and then have it taken away. I said, I've been through enough emotional ups and downs with our fertility treatments. I just don't think I could go through that. And I said, just listening to these stories, wonderful stories, and adoption is a wonderful thing. I said, I just don't feel it was right for us. So we said, well, now what? And we kind of sat on it for a while. And we had a trip planned to Florida where my parents lived at the time, and said, well, let's just take this vacation and just relax, and maybe we're done. Maybe Maddie is our only child, and then maybe that'll be good enough. And he said, yep, let's take this time off to just think. So we were driving to Florida, and I pulled out my Clearly Caring from Christian Life Resources, and I'm flipping through reading the articles, and there was an article on the first snowflake baby in the United States, which is an adopted embryo baby. And I read this article, and when we got to our first stop at a wayside, I said, honey, you have to read this article. It's about embryo adoption. And I said, I think we need to do this. This sounds amazing, and I really think this is what we should do. And he read it, and we went on our vacation, came back, and we prayed about it, and he said, I agree with you. I really think this is what we should try. He said, I know you've been through a lot with all these treatments and everything. He said, but something spoke to us about the embryo adoption, and he said, let's try it. So we tried it. The National Embryo Donation Center is who we went through. It was started by a pro-life fertility doctor named Dr. Keenan, and their mission statement starts out, I believe it's something like, we want to share the love of Christ by the blessing of embryo adoption. And that's how it starts. And I thought, what a wonderful way to start your vision statement. because that's exactly how I feel about embryo adoption now. I thought when you gave your sermon today, Pastor Fleischman, and you talked about sharing the love of Christ first, and that's the first part of their mission, and I thought, wow, that kind of gels with just what we're talking about here. And Dr. Keenan, being a fertility doctor, had ethical concerns about IVF, and what's done to these embryos during IVF. And he wanted to do something about all of these embryos that are just out there that are being frozen, so he started this clinic to have donors donate their embryos and people adopt them. And we had this one mentioned today, do speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And obviously those tiny embryos, those tiny little humans cannot speak for themselves. And it's estimated, when I gave this talk, I think it was 10 years ago now, I gave this talk for the first time. There was estimated to be 500,000 frozen embryos just in limbo in the United States. Right now that's estimated to be about 1 million. So at National Embryo Donation Center, we went through there in Knoxville, Tennessee. They do have a process because they really do truly want to try to give as much life to these embryos as they can. So they do have some criteria over, and being a Christian organization, they want to give as much chance at life to these embryos as they can. The couples have to be diagnosed as infertile and they have to have tried some other means first. Without success, the mother has to be deemed that she at least can possibly carry a baby. So her doctor has to say, yes, we believe that this person can carry a baby, because they don't want to transfer an embryo into somebody that probably cannot carry a baby, because their ultimate goal is to try to give life to these embryos. They do have, you can try up to 3 times, and if you try 3 times with the National Embryo Donation Center without a successful pregnancy, then unfortunately then they say you can't come back, because their ultimate goal is to try to give life to these frozen embryos. So they do have a 54% pregnancy rate, which has gone up from when we went there. It was like 48 point something then, and now their rate is up to 54%. It was kind of strange, the process to select the embryos, because we chose anonymous. Most of the donors are anonymous. You can have somewhat of an open thing. With the people that donate the embryos, you can have the choice if they choose and you choose to let them know if a baby was born and be somewhat involved in the life of the baby. We chose completely anonymous. So when you're choosing the embryos, they have this list of these are the embryos we have available. And you get very limited information on the embryos and the donors of them. And it felt really strange to be looking at these, and it's like, how do you choose embryos? It was like shopping from a list. It felt really strange. It's like, okay, what do we choose? And I guess it's human nature. You choose, okay, well, these parents have brown hair and brown eyes like us, so I guess we'll choose them. It was like, it was odd. But that's kind of how we chose the first time. And we chose, they like you to choose 6 to 8 embryos to start with. And we chose 6 the first time, and they were all from the same donors, the same genetic donors. So we went to Indiana for embryo transfer, and there were 6 embryos, and they do not thaw them all at the same time, because they want to preserve the embryos and try to give them life, so they didn't thaw all 6 at the same time. They thaw them one at a time. And unfortunately, not all the embryos survived the thaw. 2 of them that time died during the thawing process. 2 of them after the thawing, but before they could transfer them, died. So at the last minute, they had to thaw the last 2, and they implanted 2 embryos into me, and that was in March of 2009. After they implant the embryos, you go home, and you wait 10 days, and you take a pregnancy test. Well, I was not pregnant. And it was very devastating after everything that we had been through. We thought, oh, this was really what we really thought was the way that we were going to have another child. And we really thought that this was a blessing from God, that these, the embryo adoption. And we thought, what are we going to do? And the doctor called us personally after he found out that we weren't pregnant. He said, I saw nothing in the embryos and nothing in your medicals or anything as to why you didn't get pregnant. He said, I have no explanation for it. He said, but I encourage you to try again. Because he said, it was a fluke, I don't know why. He said, but if you have it in you to try one more time, I encourage you to do that. So we prayed about it hard, because it was very emotionally straining. I don't know if any of you have ever gone through infertility, or if you know anybody who has, but it's something that's very emotionally straining. It's physically straining on the woman because there's a lot of hormones and drugs that you have to take that can be very physically straining on your body. And it was straining on our marriage too. And this passage during the whole process helped me a lot. I stuck it on my mirror. I printed it out really big and I stuck it on my mirror in my bathroom. So every morning when I would get up, I would see these words, and I would be like, okay, do not be anxious. God's right there with me. He can give me peace. Just be thankful for everything that I have, and know that he's with me, and that he's always going to give me peace and guard my heart and my mind. And knowing that would just get me through every day. So that passage got me through this whole thing. So we decided, okay, we're going to try one more time, but that's going to be it. I know the NEDC says that you can try 3 times. We're going to try one more time, and if it doesn't work, then maybe Jesus just did say no, and that's it. We can't do it anymore. So we decided to do one more embryo adoption. This time we went to the clinic in Tennessee, which is where Dr. Keenan started, and Dr. Keenan did the embryo transfer. And our selection of the embryos was the same. You look at this list, you try to pick, and the first set of embryos that we wanted, somebody had already chosen those. And there was another set, and they said, oh, somebody just grabbed those. Oh, you got to pick another set. And we're like, well, okay. There was one that had 4 and another one that had 2, and they're like, well, you can take those and put them together and, do it that way. And I said, okay. And the way we chose the 4 was the parents had blonde hair and blue eyes, and our daughter has blonde hair and blue eyes. At least if we have a child, that child will look like their sister. I don't know why our daughter has blonde hair and blue eyes. She's a recessive gene child, I guess, because my husband and I both have dark hair and dark eyes. So we're like, well, the child will look like the sister, and there we go. So that's how we chose the embryos that time. And the time when they called us up and they said, okay, we've got your appointment set, you got to come down to Tennessee. The date we have set to do the embryo transfer is July 14th. Well, that was our 8th anniversary. I thought, is it a sign? I don't know. I believe God gives us signs. And I thought maybe that's a sign from God that this time it's going to work out. So we drove down to Tennessee, and while we were driving, I said to Matt, I don't know. I said, I've been struggling with this. We want this child so bad. I said, are we doing this because it's our own human nature that we want another child? Or is this really God's will that we have another child and that we're doing this? Maybe it's just us, and that maybe we shouldn't even be doing this again. And while we're talking about it, we had the radio on. And it wasn't a Christian radio station. It was just some random radio station. And the DJ was saying, what do you do when you're really stressed out? I want people to call in and tell me, I'm having a real stressful day. Call in and tell me what you do when you're stressed out. And this woman called in and said, when I'm really stressed out, I read this Bible passage. Be still and know that I am God. I thought, wow, this isn't a Christian radio station, and this passage comes over the air. And I thought, this is God telling me just, hey, settle down, I've got this. don't worry, no matter what happens, I'm God, and I've got this, and I've got you. So I was like, okay. After I heard that, it calmed me down. We went, and the next morning, we had the embryo transfer. We had 6 embryos, 4 from one donor, 2 from the other. 1 did not make the thaw. 3 of them did, and they transferred those. The other 2 that were from another donor, they never even thawed. So we redonated those back to the NEDC. We felt pretty good about it. These are the embryos that they transferred. That was the date that they transferred them. I mentioned they kind of grade embryos. You don't know what the gradings are when you choose the embryos because they don't want people saying, well, I don't want those, I don't want to adopt those because those are bad graded ones. But once you adopt them, they tell you what they are. So one of those was they grade the other presenter was talking about how part of the embryo is going to be the baby and the other part is the placenta. They grade the baby part and the placenta part. So one is an AB, one is a BB, and one is a BC. I don't know which is which. I can't tell you because they just look like blobs to me. But those are the 3 embryos that they put in. And we went home. We waited our 10 days. And I got a phone call while I was at work, and it was my doctor himself. And he said, "You're pregnant." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Leah, we've been through so much. Would I kid you about this?" Later on, we had my ultrasound, and there was 1 baby. So the 3 embryos, 2 of them did not survive, obviously, but we had 1 baby. That's our ultrasound there. That was September 16th. And a couple other ultrasound pictures. So while I was pregnant, I was borderline high risk because by this time I was 39 years old after going through all this. So my doctor saw him quite often. He did quite a few ultrasounds, and he wanted to keep an eye on it. And this was his first adopted embryo pregnancy. He had never done one of those before, so he thought, hey, this is kind of cool. You know, I want to see this through, and I want to make sure that I'm there when this baby's born. So I'm not going to schedule any vacations or anything around your due date because I want to make sure that I'm there when this baby's born. So Maddie was really excited to finally be becoming a big sister. And one of the days when I came home from the ultrasound, Maddie said, well, I showed her the picture, and she said, well, can they tell on the ultrasound if the baby's going to be deaf? And I said, no, they can't tell that. We'll have to wait till the baby's born. And she said, well, that's okay if he's not deaf. We'll love him anyways. So she wanted to name him Calvin. And 4 weeks before my due date, we had I had an appointment, I think it was 3 days before that, and my doctor had scheduled to induce me because I was having issues. The baby was getting really big and causing a great deal of discomfort. He was pushing on a rib of mine, and he said, we'll induce you as soon as we know for sure that you're at a right amount of weeks where the baby's going to be all good. He said, I'm listening to heart and lungs, and we want to give him a few more weeks. But we'll give you a due date. Well, 4 weeks before his due date, my water broke in the middle of the night, and it was like the foggiest day of the year. So I remember driving to the emergency room thinking, Dr. Bates better not have any vacations planned because here I am going to the doctor in the middle of the night, and he was thinking this baby was going to be born 2 weeks later. Well, March 8th, 2010, our little baby was born, and Dr. Bates was supposed to leave on vacation that day. So as I'm in labor, he's like, gotta hurry it up because I got a flight planned this afternoon, but I want this baby to be born. Well, he was born that day, and Dr. Bates made his flight that evening, so he was able to see the baby being born. But the nurses, because he was 4 weeks early, said, are you sure that this baby, are you sure of the due date? Because when he was born, he was 9 pounds, 15 ounces, 4 weeks early. And my doctor and I said, oh yeah, we know exactly the due date of this baby because we knew exactly when he was created in that Petri dish. So we said, nope. And so they had to treat him like a preemie. And they're like, this is the biggest preemie we've ever had. So they were laughing about that. We named him Isaac because how long we had to wait for him. Granted, we didn't have to wait as long as in the Bible, but for us it seemed like a long time. And Isaac also means laughter, and Isaac is now 11 years old, and he does make us laugh quite a bit. As you can see, he's laughing in that picture. He was about a year old in that picture, not even. From early on, we decided that we would, as much as we could, explain to Isaac that he was, in a way, adopted. Now, how the laws work in, I think, all the states is, we call it embryo adoption, but it's not actually an adoption in the eyes of the law. It's a property transfer. So the donors sign something that say, these embryos are our property, we're signing off all rights of them to the National Embryo Donation Center. Then they sign a property rights thing to the people that adopt them, or to us. So so his birth certificate has us as the parents always did. So it seems to me like that's a life, but it's treated as property in the eyes of the law. So we always explained to Isaac from the time he was little on, I think since he was about 5 years old, that, we kind of tried to, how do you explain to a 5-year-old when they don't really know the birds and the bees, but that God gives parents seeds that he makes into babies, and that mom's seeds weren't very good. And so we adopted some seeds from somebody else that the doctors put in mommy's tummy, and that's how we started explaining to Isaac how he became. So he always kind of knew that he was, in a way, adopted. We didn't want him to find out from some blood type science project that he was doing in school, like, hey, why do I have this blood type? You guys have that one, and this doesn't mesh. Or if he got sick someday and found out, like, hey, why can't you guys give your blood to help me out? We didn't want him to find out that way. So we wanted him to know that, in a way, he was adopted. And he's always been fine with it. He tells people at school, yeah, I was adopted. And, their kids' parents are like, you were adopted? We saw your mom pregnant. What do you mean? So then I explain, how that is. In September of 2015, that's Dr. Keenan in the middle. That's Isaac, Maddie, our daughter, my husband, and I. They celebrated their 500th baby born from the National Embryo Donation Center. Just last weekend, the National Embryo Donation Center celebrated their 1,000th baby born from there. There's a couple other clinics in the United States that do embryo adoptions, but the National Embryo Donation Center does the most of them. So they just celebrated their 1,000th baby. I don't know if any of you heard, I think it was like last December, it was in the news that there was a baby that was born from a frozen embryo that had been frozen for like 20 some years. I don't know if any of you heard. Well, that was an embryo from the National Embryo Donation Center. It wasn't a donated embryo, it was somebody that had they had frozen embryos because she had gone through cancer treatments or something like that, and then many, many years later, they, decided, okay, we're ready to have babies. And so Isaac heard that story and said, Mom, how long was I frozen? And I said, I don't know. They don't tell you when we adopt you. But I got a hold of the NEDC and said, is there a way we can find out? Isaac's 11 now, and he knows what's up. He wants to know how long he was frozen. Well, the reason he wanted to know is he wanted to know if he was really older than his sister. Well, he wasn't. He was frozen in March of 2006. But he likes to joke around with everybody at school and tell them that he's not really 11, he's 14. But this is my kids today that was taken at the Packer game in August of 2021. So That's Isaac, he's 11, and that's our daughter, Maddie, who's 19. So, no, that's our embryo adoption story. I'd be happy to answer any questions if any. I know you guys are probably ready to get out of here, but if anybody has questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer later on. One word of warning: if anybody wants to look up anything on the internet and you're using Google and you Google National Embryo Donation Center, because I did that recently, and the first one that pops up is not them. Make sure you find the one that is in Tennessee, because the first one that pops up when you're using Google as a search engine is one that tries to make designer babies. Oh, you can, we can pick the sex for you. We can make sure that your baby isn't going to have defects, things like that. And that is not the goal of NEDC at all. So if any of you are looking up on the internet, make sure you get the one that's in Tennessee, because that's the one that we went through. Thank you.